Pardon? Oui, ça fonctionne. Hein? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Villa Albertine. My name is Mohamed Bouabdallah, the new director of Villa Albertine and Cultural Counselor of France in the US. I'm pleased to welcome you tonight for the launch of our new Heritage Speaks series. Before coming to that, I would like to remind you what we have already done with our museum series. Through this program, we delved into the current challenges facing French and American museums. We invited 12 French women museum directors to exchange views with their American counterparts about the future of museums. This series was organized with the Center for Curatorial Leadership, and it allowed inspiring professionals to discuss their path to leadership and their commitment to opening cultural institutions to new voices and narratives. And so this year we decided to add another program, thanks to François Bridet, who is here, who is in charge for Villa Albertine. And so we decided to team up with the World Monuments Fund, a renowned, should I introduce it, an independent organization that has been at the forefront of heritage preservation since 1965. WMF promotes a sustainable valorization of cultural heritage at the global scale, while paying special attention to the involvement of communities and supporting local stakeholders. And it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Bénédicte de Montlort, who is about to speak after me, who is leading this institution, and she's a dear friend to mine. And she was the Cultural Counselor of France some years ago, and I was also her intern at one point. So it's always very good to work with Bénédicte. Together, our two teams have curated a public program of conferences and panel discussions, and it starts tonight, so thank you very much for joining us. And it will continue throughout April and May and into the fall, and we were just discussing the program, the exciting program that we will have during the fall. These discussions will bring to light the specific issues and challenges facing the preservation of World Heritage sites. Political conflicts may first come to mind, but cultural sites can be vulnerable to a wide range of threats, from global warming and natural disasters to economic upheavals and mass tourism. And in my previous capacity, I traveled all over the world as a director for UN Security Council, and I saw that at first hand, how the preservation of heritage is indeed very important. So this series is especially meaningful for us, as France has been a long-standing advocate for the protection of endangered heritage sites. Our country was a founding member of UNESCO in 1946, and its seat is in Paris, as you all know. And France also recently took part in the creation of the ALIF Foundation, the International Alliance for the Protection of Heritage in Conflict Areas. And we are also committed to share our expertise in the field of heritage conservation, and we are actively collaborating with various countries in that regard. Tonight is a good example of what we are trying to do. With our first panel, we will head off to southwestern Alaska, and more specifically to Nunalleq, an archaeological site that retains the essential history of the local Yupi'k community. As rising sea levels and erosion threaten to wash away the traces of the ancient Yupi'k village, researchers and local actors have joined forces to conduct an extensive survey of the site and preserve its archaeological material that has been discovered. Since 2022, Villa Albertine, the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the NG Foundation have supported Claire Houmard's project. She is an archaeologist and a professor at the University of Besançon. She has been working against the clock with archaeologists from the University of Aberdeen, as well as the local community. And so we are delighted to welcome her tonight alongside Lynn Church from the Yupi'k community of Knecht. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. Almost. And WMF experts Ann Cuss and Jonathan Bell. Thank you for joining us. So they will share their field experiences with us, and they will reflect on their collective efforts to safeguard indigenous heritage. Before turning the floor over to our speakers and to Benedict, I would like to thank Villa Albertine's and WMF's teams for developing this new initiative, as well as those who have supported us or maybe will after tonight. Don't hesitate, we are here for that. I wish you all a great evening and enjoy the compelling dialogue. Please welcome Bénédicte de Montlore.
Right, so good evening, everyone. Of course, for me, it's very special to come back here. This place is very important to me. I served 4 years here as cultural counselor, but I came many times before when I was at the UN and when Mohamed was my intern. I think you're the most successful intern I've ever had. So really a pleasure also to bring my former colleagues, I see many of them in the room, with my new colleagues from WMF together, because as Mohamed has just explained, we share in many aspects the same mission. Heritage is very important to France, exchange of ideas, and of course World Monuments Fund is a leading heritage preservation organization. We are carrying projects all around the world. At the moment we have 53 projects in 35 countries, and so I travel a lot and see how much heritage matters. You know, heritage is really the things that people take for granted. It's all around us, and we all think it's here forever. But our next event will be about Notre Dame, and I think we all remember that day when we saw the flames coming out of Notre Dame, and we all felt like this is not only the heritage of France, this is the heritage of humanity, the heritage of all of us, and it's part of our history and identity that disappears. So yes, heritage speaks. So very good title chosen. Heritage speaks to our identity. Heritage speaks to our history, and we see it everywhere. I just came back from Africa. I was in Zimbabwe and Zanzibar looking at rock arts painted 18,000 years ago by our ancestors who are already expressing their identities, their views, their life. And so that's why at World Monuments Fund we are doing everything we can to preserve those anchors that tell us so much about who we are as human, what we are doing today, and where we're going. Heritage also speaks about community, so that's why I think it was important to us to have this first event about indigenous heritage and indigenous communities, because of course we all think of heritage like the big castles and cathedral, etc. But heritage takes many different shapes, and it's also very often the heritage of underrepresented people that not that many person supports or cares about, and that's why it's so important that we are supporting this site through Villa Albertine, and we're also going to talk about Bears Ears site in Utah, which is another very important place for Native American heritage here in the US, and that is supported by the Butler Conservation Fund. Heritage, you know, builds community. All of us, we have a place that matters, whether it's Central Park, whether it's the Statue of Liberty, whether it's a church, whether it's a synagogue or a mosque, where we gather with our friends and family. And that's why every day, me, all my colleagues and my teams and all our partners around the world do whatever we can to support this heritage. So I'm delighted that Villa Albertine invited us for this series of events around heritage. Heritage Speaks. Of course, thank particularly Judith Rose, who was here holding the fort, as well as François Bridet, who has worked tirelessly with Angélie Revaux, where is she, in my team, to shape this event. And it's going to be a very exciting and diverse series of lectures tonight about about indigenous heritage. The next one is very soon is going to be about Notre Dame, which is the largest heritage project of the century, and we'll have more coming. So thank you so much. I'm going to leave the floor now to Jonathan Bell, our Vice President of Programs, who is going to moderate this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedict. Thank you. And it's so good to see so many faces here tonight. As Benedict mentioned, I am Jonathan Bell. I'm the Vice President of Programs at World Monuments Fund. And it's a real pleasure to be here, to be able to moderate this first conversation that we're having as part of the Heritage Speaks series. And I want you to remember something you heard said a few times already, community. We're going to be talking a lot about community, which is really what is behind heritage, right? So just a few more words about World Monuments Fund. What we basically do is partner with communities, local communities around the world to promote and protect the places that are important to them. And the conversation we're going to have tonight is about a place that's important to not only the community there, but is really important to the world. And so I'm excited to be able to bring that to you. So we're going to go to the town of, or it's a site of Nunalleq, which I know Lynn is going to correct all of us, and I look forward to asking you to do that for us, Lynn, which, if I'm not mistaken, means old village in Yupi'k, right? So this is a site, an archaeological site now, that sits on the Bering Sea, and it's just a few miles away from the modern-day village of Nalaquq, which again, you're going to correct us. But what's incredible about this site is this is a town, a settlement that dates back over 700 years. And what's very interesting about the history of the place that once had, as far as we know, up to about 50 people, I think, is we'll hear more about numbers. This goes back, of course, to before so-called first contact, before Euro-American colonization of North America, and a time that really allows us to look back into Yupi'k history and the history of the community of people there. And one of the fascinating aspects of this history is that sometime in the 16th century, the people left. I don't know if we know exactly how or why, but we'll hear more about that over the course of the conversation. And in so leaving, they left this place where they lived, but also all of the artifacts, the parts of their life, of kind of their cultural life, daily life, all left there on site. And because of where we are in the world, in subarctic tundra, these things were frozen into the landscape. And now, with climate change and so many other challenges that we're seeing, some of that has basically emerged. And so it really became a bit of a rescue mission in many ways to salvage the site, the artifacts that were left behind, because things that are frozen for a long time and suddenly go through thaw are quite vulnerable. And I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about that too. So a really rich story about the place, but also about the efforts to save it. And then at the end, I think we'll hear a little bit about how this has really reinvigorated and re-energized the local community in terms of their own culture and history. So before we jump in, because I know everybody's already been introduced, so we're going to jump in a conversation, but I do want to remind people that we will have time for questions at the end. So please do think of your questions, hold them, keep them, and we'll have that opportunity for conversation with the audience as we get to the end of the conversation. So I just want to highlight, what this conversation is going to be about in a general sense. One, the importance of cultural heritage, for sure. We know that. We're all here because of that. Benedict said some great things about what cultural heritage is and why it's important. But also about the rapidly growing and increasing threat of climate change. And we're going to see what that really means for historic places and many indigenous sites as well. Finally, and one other thing I want to highlight is the challenge of indigenous heritage. Many indigenous sites, not only in North America, but around the world, are under-recognized. In other words, they don't have protection. They're not seen sometimes as heritage places by other groups. They're under-resourced. They don't have the money for the support to protect them, to keep them safe. And so this is one of the stories of many indigenous sites, but there's a positive side of great work that's happening, and that's what we're bringing tonight. And then there's the socioeconomic component that, again, we'll get into of how a site like this can really reinvigorate a local community. So we're really lucky to have this wonderful group of speakers with us, and I want to just kind of start with you, Lynn. You are from the Yupi'k community, is that right? Or how would you say where you're from? Maybe I'll ask you that first.
Hi, my name is Lynn Church. I'm born and raised in Quinhagh. My parents are Willard and Mary Church. I grew up living in Quinhagh all my life. I still practice subsistence lifestyle. I did go to school. I went to University of Alaska Fairbanks and, traveled the world too, but I always felt like I always had to go back, and I always go back to Quinhagh because it's a part of who I am, and I grew up on the coastal village of Quinhagh, and I always have to be by the ocean, and this is an important project we'll talk about today.
Thank you so much. And what I wanted to ask you in terms of the Nunalleq and the site and the project is you've been there since the beginning, been involved since the beginning, and so maybe you can tell us a little bit about how it got started, what it's meant, and in particular the community engagement. And I know you've played a big part in that, of how the Yupi'k community has been involved in all of this work. And I think we may have some images coming up.
So the beginning of the Nunalleq project started in 2009. Our boss, Warren Jones, he's the CEO of Knecht and the board of directors, noticed there was a lot of changes due to climate change. There was a high level of seas and our storms kept getting bigger and bigger. And even today, our storms it used to be just the fall and spring, and it's probably like 8 times a year. And what you guys have to understand is that when we had the first contact by the missionaries, our community was heavily influenced by the missionaries, meaning a lot of our practices were silent. When I grew up, we didn't really practice a lot of the spiritual world. We didn't really practice a lot of different things because we were told it was a sin. And so for that, it was unfortunate, but we still practiced the subsistence lifestyle. If you go back, it's a community of 800 people. And if you go to the next slide, like I said, we still practice the subsistence lifestyle. We follow the subsistence calendar throughout the year. And on a nice day, you're not going to find me in the office. I will leave my phone. I will not answer emails. Like I just said, last week I was out moose hunting. I went on a 6-hour snow machine ride on a work day because it was nice and it was a good opportunity to go, and I needed meat. Like I said, the start of the project, as you can see, like I said, the storms are getting rapid. And in our culture, lachtaking is, digging artifacts was forbidden. However, when Rick came and they found an artifact on the shore, he went to the elders and said, hey, if we don't rescue these are going to be lost in sea forever. And the curiosity of the questions that the younger generation have, we're always going to keep questioning who we were. And like over the years, it started in 2009 as a small excavation site with the University of Aberdeen. However, our elders always taught us that we have to share our knowledge, meaning that we have to partner with people that want to partner with us to get new ideas and to spark new projects, not just within the excavation, but have a positive effect on how we can save our culture, how can we use current technology into saving our language, our practices, but also spark the fire in the younger generation to be proud of who they are. And I'll go more into that later.
So maybe you can just say a little bit more about how how the relationship has worked in terms of with the archaeologists and the research that's happening. And it's so interesting, you mentioned that this was a practice that was forbidden traditionally, and so how has the community really been involved in that practice of the archaeology?
When you're an archaeologist and you come to a community like Quinhagh, you really have to approach that community with that holistic perspective. You really have to set aside your personal views and your personal biases and really come into the community with an open mind. And you have to be respectful. And Rick came in, he had that mindset because he worked in Alaska, and he knew the cultural norms and he knew how to communicate, and communication is a big part of your project being successful. And the way he communicated and the way that he respected everyone, everyone accepted him into the community. He basically became our Ilok. Ilok is our cousin.
I was going to say, and Rick Knecht, is that how we pronounce his name? Knecht? Rick Knecht is the head lead archaeologist from University of Aberdeen. I don't think we mentioned his full name. And so maybe we'll turn over to Claire and talk a bit more about the archaeology, the work that's been done. You've been involved in the project for a number of years now. And I just want to say one thing before we go to you, because you talked about storms increasing, the challenges of climate change, and this ties into the archaeological work too. If I understand correctly, one of the parts of the sites that was excavated back in 2008, 2009, something like that, right, has since been completely lost to the sea. The sea has washed it away. So this is a site that is being actively impacted by climate change. So sorry, Claire, please go ahead.
Yes. The project started with Rick before starting with the University of Aberdeen, and it's because he was employed there that the project was also linked to the University of Aberdeen. And they were able to build a huge project and involve everybody from the village to be able to rescue a part of this site, the part that you can see in red, between 2009 and 2010, and now you can see that this part is almost completely destroyed. And the black square is what they did between 2013 and 2018. And it was done by the University of Aberdeen. It's one of the biggest excavation that we have in the Yupi'k world. And it's amazing all what we could find in it. This is one of the pictures that can show you what was discovered in terms of structure. So it was some kinds of sod house that were built. They were semi-subterranean, and they were used almost all year round. They didn't have the same entrance in winter and in summer, but they were living at the same place, and the University of Aberdeen was able to prove that we got at least 3 different generations at the same site, and maybe more. So it was occupied from the 15th to the 17th century. And this site is very interesting because it's also linked to the oral tradition. Do you want to?
Well, and maybe I can just ask you, I mean, for the whole audience, what do you think are some of the most exciting discoveries here or lessons that we've learned about Yupi'k history and about this specific site?
Maybe 2 things. The one is the link with the oral history, because as Lynn said, they already know that the site was here, and they already know the story of the site. And what was amazing is to see the link and how the oral history was very close to what the archaeologists were able to find. And you also have the material culture, because everything was frozen and everything was preserved. You could find some basketry, you can find the different faunal remains that were eaten, and you can find all the kind of artifact linked to the subsistence, the symbolic, and everything is in that site in terms of the way of life. And this way of life is not that far from what was known before the missionaries. And the abandonment of the site was also very well known by the culture, because it was the time of the bows and arrows warfare, and the site was attacked by the neighbors, and some people were killed and others have to go away. And one of the first layers that was found on this site was burnt, and it was like the way to demonstrate that the oral tradition is very well preserved, even during the 4 centuries that separate the present and the last occupation of the site. And what was very important also in this project is the fact that the object could stay in the village. And it was not easy, and it was some discussion that were done between the elders and the villagers, and it was a huge responsibility as well for a small village to be able to host and store in good condition a huge collection. It's the biggest collection of the Yupi'k archaeology all of the world, and it's in this small village of 800 people. And it's more than 150,000 artifacts, and maybe 500 could go in every big museum in the world and be on exhibition. So they are also proud to have this in the village and to be able to show the object to everybody, including the children.
That's really amazing, and I think we have to come back to that point, because that's really incredible, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. I want to just bring Anne into the conversation, and I think Anne can help give us a little bit of maybe context to the broader, Indigenous Native American landscape, particularly in the U.S., but also in Canada. And I wonder if you might be able to talk to us a bit about, I guess, some of the similar challenges or distinctions that we might see at other sites, and what this all makes you think of.
Yeah, so just listening to everyone speak, it's so parallel to what a couple of our sites that we work on with WMF. The first one that comes to mind is the Bears Ears landscape that's supported by Butler Conservation. And it's the same thing, just in a different place, where it's very cold, it's very arid and hot, but we know that around 1100, these different climate impacts and rapid climate change, they really changed the landscape of the Bears Ears, really like the Four Corners region of the Southwest. And that's when we saw challenges with foodstuffs, crops that people relied on, maize, small game, things like that. It just went away. And a lot of that was because of changes in moisture and with water. People didn't have water. So when they didn't have water, we didn't have the animals, we didn't have the ecology that supported human consumption, not only for food, but also for building materials and just the way that people live traditionally. So when we're talking about the bow and arrow wars, it just reminds me of other pressures that arose from that. It's been debated for a long, long time if it was one factor, if it was the climate, if it was war, if it was contact, what it was. But you know, in our business, we like to call those push factors, and really those are just selective pressures. There's a big narrative with the Bears Ears landscape that people abandoned their homes and they left their sites because it didn't have any value or you know, for many reasons. But we know that with indigenous landscapes and indigenous culture that there's often this narrative that's grossly inaccurate. And all of these pressures that we talk about, these push factors, that's what kind of led to people competing for resources, really. So people had to go south to Chaco Canyon area in New Mexico and even as far as the Rio Grande.
And, you know, we mentioned a little bit earlier this idea, not idea, it's a fact, that often many indigenous sites, and particularly in the Americas, but again everywhere, are kind of under-recognized, underrepresented, and that presents a certain type of challenge. I'm just wondering if you could say anything to that and any other sites that might come to mind.
Another site does come to mind. It makes me think of Garcia Pasture. Garcia Pasture is the ancestral land of the Nunalleq, which is located in Brownsville, Texas, around the U.S.-Mexico border. And this is a community that, and when I say this, I'll explain it, they've really had to fight for their validity, meaning that they've had to kind of prove that they are a tribal entity, prove that they are a true culture. And when I say that, what I mean is that they don't have that recognition that you were talking about earlier, which really equates to they don't have a legal status in the United States where some other communities do. The state of Texas does not have any recognized tribes, bands, anything, and there are very strict criteria around what qualifies as legal recognition for being a tribe or a tribal group. And what that means is the protections that some communities have, you know, like in Bears Ears, we're working with a coalition, we're working with some, if not one of the biggest on the mainland at least, recognized tribes by the federal government. The Nunalleq does not have that. So not only are they fighting to prove who they are, they're fighting to keep the tangible, the material culture. Garcia Pasture is not a big site. I think it's about 62 acres. I can't convert that quick, but it's a very, very small site of what's left of a very larger cultural complex and landscape. So part of why we wanted to put Garcia Pasture and work with Nunalleq and put them on the WMF watch was to highlight these challenges, but also rebalance what we know about indigenous history in North America. Garcia Pasture was selected of a handful of sites for our Magnum Foundation partnership, which is this photojournalism exercise that not only documents what is left of the site, but documents the community, so the day-to-day life, how these affects and how all of this history kind of culminates, so we get a peek into what they've been through, what they're going through, and they really have a direct role in how their culture, what's left of it, is being interpreted. There's this saying when we talk about exhibiting culture collections that there are three opinions, right? Three agents in the room. There's the viewer, there's the curator, and then there's the object or the artifact itself. And what I really love about our work, really our work everywhere, but our work with the Garcia Pasture site and Bears Ears is that this is an opportunity that we really haven't seen a lot to work with communities directly to control their narrative and help us give that context and that history that many people don't even know. This is one of the biggest tribes in Texas, and I'd never heard of them, I'm not gonna lie, like when this watch nomination came through. And we know that how these objects, how these items, how these traditions are presented, that's what gives it context, because without that meaning and without the oral histories to support and that lineage, they're just sites, they're just objects. Doing this together helps them heal, but it also gives us as outsiders a peek into not only the places, but the worldviews that come with them.
Thank you, Anne, for that. I want to come back to Nunalleq and talk a little bit about particularly the challenges of climate change. And we already talked about parts of the site being lost while you were working there. How are you dealing with that? I mean, this is one of the questions that heritage around the world is facing, particularly in the face of climate change, but there are also other things that destroy and cause damage to heritage, and everyone is having to come to terms with the fact that loss may be inevitable. And I'm just wondering how your community has been dealing with that, seeing sea level rise and seeing the changes in the climate, and how that's impacting all of you.
Just to give you a little history, Nunalleq, it means a new river. The elders always told us that we would relocate 5 times due to climate. We are on our 3rd, and in a couple of years we're going to be on our 4th till we find a permanent settlement. The way we're dealing with it is that we're trying to find solutions, just like any other community that's facing climate change. We're trying to work with federal and state agencies, FEMA and everything to get funding to relocate, because we're facing not only coastal erosion but riverine erosion, and it keeps getting worse every year. But how to answer your question, how are we dealing with it? In our Yupi'k culture, we adapt. We always adapt. I mean, I was just telling, one of my friends, I was like, in our Yupi'k culture, our environment's always changing. Look at me. If it was up to me, I'd be speaking in Yupi'k in this conversation, but I'm not. I adapted to Western society because, the economics and having to have a job. If it was up to me, if I didn't need money, I'd be out living on the land, but it's not possible. And like I said, in our Yupi'k culture, in all the cultures in Alaska and the United States and around the world, we learn to adapt to everything. We're strong people. And like I said, we've been living the subsistence lifestyle for hundreds of years, but when you look back at the artifacts that have been found, it's the same practices, but we're just adapting with the technology.
Claire, I wonder if you could answer a similar question in terms of the archaeological site. I mean, how technically do you deal with this? What do you prioritize? How do you respond to the challenges of climate change?
Yeah, the site is just along the beach, so we need to operate and to do some rescue archaeology very fast. And every year, we don't know if the site will be there the next year and the next summer. So we are trying to do as much as we can each year, and we are starting by the most threatened part. And then we can go a bit further and see what happens. And because of the logistics, and it's very good to have Lynn and the village supportive for the project, because everything costs a lot, not only for the archaeologists, but for all the village. Everything is very expensive. So it's not that easy to be able to do some archaeology or to live in that place, and you always depends on the barge that can go only twice a year, and the plane that can also provide some stuff, but it's 10 times more expensive than when you have the barge. So everything costs a lot. And so we are trying to do what we can, and we have the chance since last summer to have the support also of the Anchorage Museum for the conservation part of the object. So Monica can help and do the best for this object to preserve them, because almost everything is of organics and especially of wood, and if we don't do anything, they will just disappear in the year. So what is also very interesting on that site is the link that we can do from the past and the present. We have the same tools on the site, and Lynn's father is making these same knives for the processing of the fish and everything.
I'd love to pick up on that kind of continuity of culture, and I guess maybe rediscovery. We're talking about really a rediscovery of some of the history, and come back to, on one hand, this incredible collection of artifacts. I'm sure that caught everyone's eyes and ears to hear about this huge collection of Yupi'k artifacts, the largest in the world, that's there now in a town of 800 people that we heard is going to have to relocate. I'd be curious to hear, well, I have so many questions, but first, I guess what that has meant for your community, this rich history that's kind of come up from the earth and that now you are the caretakers of, but it's also providing these new opportunities for rediscovery and links with the past. Could you speak to that a little bit? Yeah.
When we had our first show and tell in 2009, we didn't expect the community members to show up, especially the elders. And when we had our setup, it was basically a little expedition. You know, we had the masks, the RV carvings, and all the artifacts we found. We put them in display. And when we had our opening, the whole community showed up. And what's so great and amazing about it is that the elders who were, you know, always telling us or what to follow from, you know, growing up, especially the, you know, the things you can't do and the things we couldn't practice, when they saw those artifacts, something changed. There was a change of heart. They realized that it was their duty as elders of the community to start speaking up, meaning that we're not going to be silenced anymore. During that show and tell, they started telling stories of the past, even songs I've never even heard of, basically causing a positive ripple effect on different other projects that came out of the archaeological site. Like I said, once they realized that it was important, they ramped up the dance group. If you can go back. No, forward. The dance group restarted after 100 years by a group of kids. And when they danced their heart out and basically caused another ripple effect. One of the students over there, he said, Rosetta Stone will not make an app for our Yupi'k culture. So he went to school, got a degree in computer science, and went to UW and studied linguistics and created the Yupi'k app with one of his collaborators from Bethel region. So there's a Yupi'k app. And then there's the dance group, the Yupi'k app, and then the younger generation started carving again. They go to the museum, they look at the artifacts, and they get inspired to carve contemporary art. And then there's other people using digital technology to, you know, to make means of income, basically sharing our culture.
I think there are probably a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we have enough time. I got a lot of questions, but I'll let the audience come in. But please, I'd like to turn it over to the audience. Any questions about Nunalleq, anything that we've been talking about? And we have a wonderful group here who can answer them. Do you have so while you're thinking of your questions and articulating them, we have a video that Lynn wanted to show.
Yeah, the video is basically another, you know, a positive effect is the digital museum. We were able to work with community leaders, language barriers, and universities to create a digital museum, and you guys are going to watch that video right now.
We can't have any volume?
Laput ubi ngalchud, Nalaquq malch gamuchnik, galam jiuchtlich gamuchniklu. Nalun richu, Archaeologist Dallara Nunalleq mi. Nalun eichgi, Nalaquq Liijung charluten lu, kail, na lunri lautiit, jautiitnek. Tangertjiqaaten irrinarqutjiit ayyainanerpani.
Tiuniuraati nunallqam qalamtit nunaakalaalqatnik tiulaaput.
And we just got funding to continue on this work, and the new site is nunalleq.org. And we're actually meeting the team next week to continue on the work that's being done with the Digital Museum.
That's fantastic. So I promised some time for questions. I see one there, and there are some mics that are running around. So maybe we can give this gentleman a mic, and anyone else, please get your hands up. We can get you a mic.
Yes. In passing, you mentioned that you found many artifacts. It would be nice if you describe what these artifacts were about, how they fit into the culture, what kinds of artifacts they were, what their purpose was. For instance, the image we have here, how were they used? What do they signify?
Yeah, you have lots of artifacts, and you have some masks that were used first for the dance, but also some of them were split in two, and it seems that it was a kind of ritualized construction of the house as well, and some of them were put in the post holes, and it's probably something linked to the protection of the house at the time that the house was built. You have some figurines and some earrings as well. We have lots of figurines, hundreds and hundreds, and some of them are happy and some of them are sad, and sometimes you just return it and you have the sad and happy person. It's amazing, and some of them also have some fur to do the barb or to put the hair. Some of them also have the labrets, like the one that were wearing by the people to sign their identity. You have some pendants as well. You can find also some story knives that can show that the oral tradition was already very important for them in the past. You have some parts of the kayak, the real one and the kayak models as well. And you have lots of objects that could be linked to the childhood. You have lots of toys as well that we can find. We have the weapons. You have the bow and arrow, you have the harpoon, you have the fish nets, the fish lures, you have all the subsistence employment that you can find. Here you have the bows and arrows and the points, and because it was pre-contact, we have a very few pieces that show that the metal, the iron was used. And in fact, on the 150,000 artifacts, we only have one piece of iron. So it's mostly everything was mostly done by lithics, especially the slates, and it's what you can see here, for example, with the ulwak, the woman's knife. They were on lithics. Now they are using some iron blades or metal blades, but at that time it was on lithics and it was very effective. And it just some of them. We should have put lots of slides on the object, but we had to choose some. And almost every part of their culture, the material culture, could be seen, including the basketry. They are still very proud about the basketry, and we can find some as well on the site, and it's amazing to see how well preserved it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's signs of it. There is some material that were rubies, and then there were some other materials that were traded from the interior, but also from the Alutiiq chain. So when you look at research, there's an archaeologist that came to Alaska, and he documented the trade routes.
It's amazing. It's the full record of this village, really, right? It's really incredible. Other questions? See lots of hands. Yes, you have the microphone.
Hi, I'm Earl Atchek. I'm from Yupi'k, Alaska. I went to this project before in Quinahak at Nunalleq about 2 or 3 years ago. And I want to ask you a question, the same question I asked Rick. In Yupi'k area, my people who are Yupi'k, I think we're about 200 miles away from where Lynn is, and we're along the coast. We have 2 or 3 sites that are in danger that need rescue. And I asked Rick this question, Chris or Rick, who can I contact to come help us in Yupi'k? Because we have all these artifacts that are already going in water. There's this one site, my ancestral site of Kishunak, that is the sea from all those storms. It's maybe like 1/4 mile away, and 2 years ago we had a big flood. So these guys, Lynn, I know Lynn, they're paving the way for communities like Yupi'k. Is there like someone that we can write an email to, or how can we do it?
Jonathan, do you know anybody
we need
like that?
help. Yeah.
Brah, you already know you gotta call me. No, seriously, just call me once you get approval from your corporation and who the landowners are, and you get approval from your elders. I'll gladly go to Yupi'k with a team and help you out.
See, we want to do that, but...
That's great. They're really leading the way, which is great.
Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. There were a number of other questions. I think there's a gentleman in the back. Yes.
Yes, interesting presentation so far. Let me preface this by saying that if it sounds like an 8th grade question, please forgive me, but I heard it a long time ago. One hears this, that in the Yupi'k language, like many other languages, would that be called, is that under Aleut? Larger language group, but the question is, and given with climate change and global warming, there's less snow now, but is it actually true that there are scores, I even heard hundreds, I don't know if that's true, of words for snow, but no generic word for snow, or is that some myth that we heard in the lower 48 states?
So every language has their own dialect, and in our language, it's Knecht. And what is it in yours, Earl? Yeah, but okay. Earl is an elder, and I trust his word.
Great. Other questions? I saw, I think somebody has a mic there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the interesting conversation. I have two questions. The first question is related to the site. So I was wondering if all the artifacts has been found in the same site, and if yes, what is the difference between the importance that we give to the artifacts versus the sites, and the difference between artifacts and what we put in a museum and the site, which is much more, to my point of view, linked to heritage sites. So this is the first question. The second question is that through the discovery of all the artifacts, is there something that has helped to kind of write a little bit of the history or rewrite the history of the population? Thank you.
Yeah, to answer for the first question, I think it's a very important question in terms of, because the site is like the context. And if you remove the context of the object, you remove part of the understanding of what they could say. Because you have some culture, for example, in St. Lawrence Island, they are doing what we call the subsistence archaeology. So they are digging the site and they are picking the artifact and they are selling them just to be able to live. And it's very, I think it's very problematic for two reasons. The first is because they are selling their culture. And the other one is that without any context, we cannot say anything about the artifacts except saying that it's from that place. But we cannot date them very easily, and we cannot tell the story of the site or of the people that were living there. And it's really important to be able to do some maps and to know where the objects were located. They could be in the first place, or they could have been moved and thrown away. But it's also the story of the artifacts. You have some artifacts that could have been lost by the people, just falling from the pocket, but you also have some that could have been put in some places linked to the ritual, and you could also have others left because they didn't know that they will be attacked and they had to let everything and to flee. So you have different stories that you can tell about the artifact. And if you don't have the site and the context, you cannot tell that. You can just tell, yes, it's an harpoon, and you can hunt maybe a seal with that harpoon, but you cannot say the story of the artifact in the place where it has been found. And this is very important. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second question.
Was linked to the history of the population by the discovery that has been done so far. Was it possible to kind of write a little bit the history of the ancestor, or even if the one history was existing, to rewrite it because some artifact was kind of adding some, let's say, elements to the things that maybe we didn't know or we have not heard yet?
Yeah, you know, usually in each culture, even for us, when our grandparents were telling the story of the World War II, you only have some specific points, and usually it's heroic or dramatic events, and you don't have the daily life. And it's usually what the archaeology can say, and that will not be written or preserved by the oral tradition, because usually you will not tell the story of something that you will do day after day and which is just automatic. And if we ask the kids, what did you do at school? Usually they say nothing or the same than yesterday, and it's not important for them. But for specific events, they will be able to tell the story. And it's the same with the oral tradition. Usually you have some specific events that will be able to pass from through the years and the centuries. And on this specific site it is the attacked occupation that was in the memories. But we didn't know how much how many occupation we will get, and we are still not sure about the earliest one. It should be a site occupied since the 13th century, but we are not sure yet.
So I think there's one other person with a microphone, and we're going to make this the last question, because I was told we had to end at 7:05.
I think the last question, or your answer, really set up my question. Thank you so much. I was really inspired by the final examples that Lynn was giving of the young people inspiring the elders. But my question was really about oral histories, because I know in these contexts, and you mentioned oral histories very early on in your remarks, how they've long been dismissed by archaeologists and sort of the Western scientific tradition. So I was wondering if there are any examples of places where oral traditions helped inform your understanding of sites, or the sites sort of confirmed oral traditions that maybe hadn't been respected or understood. So it's not unrelated to this question of how the site has rewritten how we understand, or how your people understand the site.
In our Yupi'k culture, we're very oral and visual. So we were always told there was the Bone Arrow Wars, and the site confirmed it. So a lot of times when we were taught about Yupi'k and Nalaquq, it's all oral history. And the way that we learn in our culture is by listening and doing something, like with our hands. We're visual learners and observing. Like for me, I'm 33 and I'm still learning from my parents, my colleagues, and the people I go hunting and fishing with. There's always something you learn every day. Like to me, I'm still a kid. And I'm a kid that's teaching my kids our culture. And what's really unique about Nalaquq and the museum, when we went to DC and did a presentation, we were told that it was impossible to get a cultural center, basically a museum, because of logistics, the high cost of everything, and coordinating everything. And my boss's favorite words, he's watching YouTube right now, was, "You want to bet?" And that drive and that, the importance of, we need to keep our tradition alive. We made it work. We always make it work. Like I said, the Yupi'k people in the Arctic, we're adaptable, but we're also resourceful because of the limited resources we have. We always find a solution. There's always a solution to each problem.
That's real wisdom right there, I think. I've been told we can take one more question, so please.
Thank you so much. Nani Hamashak. I'm Patricia Marquanorbi. I'm the Associate Curator of Native American Art at the Met. And I just want to say how moving this presentation was, because I'm on the other end of all of this, and it's good to see a project that is being done with elders and with community members, and done in a respectful and appropriate way for the community and led by the community, because when you're a curator working with Indigenous collections and you have all of these items that we refer to as ancestors, we don't refer to them as objects and not as artifacts. They are living and they're ancestors to our communities. And when you're the curator and your job is to follow NAGPRA and return these items according to federal law, it's very difficult when you don't have that community knowledge and you don't have the context for the items. And so I want to say thank you for that. But I want to say one more thing, and that is I want to thank Anne, because you mentioned the community in Texas. And my mother is Pudapacha, but my father's Kwawiltek and also Lipan. And it's so important to recognize the non-federally recognized communities, because we have 574 federally recognized nations that have that government stamp, and there are hundreds and hundreds more that don't have that and don't have that support. So I just want to thank your organization for helping those tribes that need it so much. But thank you so much for all of this. It was really, really wonderful to hear.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those beautiful comments, and thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to our wonderful panelists, Anne, Claire, and Lynn. And thank you to Villa Albertine, of course, for hosting us and being our partner. So there are some images. I'm just being told that there are images coming up. This is one of World Monuments Fund's projects at Bears Ears National Monument, working with a number of the tribes there, as well as the federal entities that manage the site. An incredibly rich cultural landscape. Anne is in charge of that project, and so we thought we could bring some of these images along too. But I just want to end by saying that we, and I was going to say we at World Monuments Fund, but I'm going to include everyone who's here tonight, because we're all one big family, and I know that we believe the same thing, which is we believe in the power of cultural heritage. We believe that it has the power to bring people together, proof right here, right, to solve problems, to fill gaps, to help define and identify people, and the act of preserving it, therefore, is something that's very powerful. And that's what we do, that's what we're all doing together, and we just want to thank you all for sharing this evening with us. And we are going to have some drinks outside, and so we'll all be milling about, so I'm sure you have more questions. Please do approach the panelists. And I just have to say our next event, our next Heritage Speaks event, excuse me, is on April 18th, and it's focusing on the rehabilitation of Notre-Dame de Paris. So please join us. Thank you all.
You were wonderful. It's really an honor to meet you.